Hey, Marlana, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
You're entirely welcome, Matthew. Glad to be here.
Yeah. Well, the way that I've been actually the new way that I've been starting the podcast is to ask this Zen question. So I wanted to ask you this Zen question and see if you have any sort of short response to it. And this is a question from an old Zen koan. And the question is, all things return to the one. Where does the one return to?
My first response is that the one is in itself whole and doesn't return. But if I had to be pressed for return, it would return to the infinitely small. It would return to the spark of creation.
Love it. Love it.
That's what I would do.
I like that. Okay, so I wanted to ask you about your childhood and upbringing a little bit, and I wanted to, how did you grow up in a religious family? Did you grow up in a religious context, or no?
No, I grew up as a devout atheist. My parents were devout atheists, and so much so that I wasn't allowed to join Bluebirds or Girl Scouts because there was a religious component to it. I was born in San Diego, and then at about the age of 3, I moved to Dover, New Hampshire, and lived there until I was 6.5, at which time we moved to central Mexico. And I lived there. I had my 7th and 8th birthday in Mexico, and because of this, I speak a little Spanish. Nice. And then we moved out of Mexico into California, and then I lived in various places in and around San Diego, in Chula Vista, in Kearny Mesa, La Mesa, El Cajon, places like that. But the religious part was really the first time I sort of felt the lack of religion was living in Mexico. So there I am, a 7-year-old little girl, surrounded by all, we're living in a village. The first village was Ajijic. Had no running water and no electricity. The next village was Chapala, which is now, it appears, a U.S. sort of expat place. But in those days, there was only my parents and as the Americans. And it was a difficult place to not have a religion. So I went to, after learning how to trill my R's in the local public school, my parents moved me to the local Catholic school, where the nuns were very strict, and we were on the playa. We were right on the beach, and our games were jacks, and the jacks were, the ball was a marble and the jacks were stones. I mean, it was really a poor village. There was no running water. Still, electricity was only like 3 hours a day. And there was one phone in the whole village. So it was a very, very primitive place. We lived next to the baños, so we could take our baths, showers next door. Kind of cool. But to the religious component was really interesting. I was afraid of the priests as they would walk down the street, because on the sidewalk in front of our house in the morning, frequently enough, would be these upside down U's, which showed that you would start to go to heaven and try to go to purgatory, and then you'd go to hell. It was very, very frightening. So as a child, I was intimidated by religion. And then moving into California, it was, a lot of Christians. My parents were not. We did not go to church. When I would really just beg them to go to church, they would take me to a UU church, which is really cool. When I was about, I think for maybe about a year, when I was, maybe less, couple of months anyway, when I was 10, they tried to go to I guess it's called a community congregationalist church, which is very similar to a UU church. A lot of congregationalist churches, I think, have become Unitarian, but I'm not sure about that. But it's a liberal religion, and it didn't fit us. It didn't fit my parents. It was very, very Christian. And so we didn't go. And then as I was, going through my teen years and I'd want to go and see what this was about, I went to, the Unitarian church a few times And then as I grew and into high school, friends were going to church and I would go with them. But I didn't dare go without someone. I didn't feel like I belonged. It's a tough place to be unchurched as a kid. It really, at least in the US, it was because people had this belief in this other thing, and I had none of that. I don't know Bible stories. My Bible was more fairy tales, as you might have known because of the thing that I wrote. And that's where I learned my morality was from those tales. And interesting, when long story short, lived in California, met a young man on the beach. 2 years later, he and I got married. I was 21, he was 22. We went off to Utah, where everyone was LDS. That's Latter-day Saints. That's Mormon. And we lived in a community that was 95% LDS. And it was the university village, but it was really geared for people with children. It was married student housing. And if you had a child, you could live in a 2-bedroom. If you didn't have a child, you had to be a 1-bedroom. They were very strict about it. And so when we had a child, they were just so helpful and so kind, and wondered why we weren't Mormons. Gee, we didn't drink, we didn't smoke. Why aren't you Mormon? Well, the religion. So moved eventually to Buffalo, and my younger son was one day, first of all, my older son wanted to join Boy Scouts. And in those days, or Cub Scouts, in those days, he was in 3rd grade, you had to have a religion badge. So I called the local church. I said, hey, when I was a kid, my parents would take me to a UU church, a Unitarian Universalist church. Can I call you my church? And the secretary of the church said, sure. And I went, okay. But to be honest, I have this thing about honesty. I had to at least attend once. So I did. I dragged my son, who was the, future Cub Scouter, to this church, and the minister read this poem. It's by Cavafy, C.V. Cavafy, written in 1813, 1803, around early 1800s. It's called Ithaca. Cavafy wrote some very, very body kind of song literature. So if you read it, but this one was not, and this is the one the minister read. And it talks about the journey of life. And in the very end, it says, it's always striving to get to Ithaca, this destination, this thing out there. And it says, when you arrive, and when you get to Ithaca, it's along in the poem, it says, hope that your journey is long and you pass many Phoenician markets and smell perfumes and the Brobdingnagians and Cyclops and Lesargonians will not come with you unless you take them with your soul. It's very, very powerful. Anyway, he read this, and I thought it was so good. The newsletter from the church came, I cut it out, put it on my refrigerator, didn't go back to the church for about 3 or 4 years. And at which time my younger son, he's in 1st grade, everyone is going to their first communion now. We're a very Catholic town, or the part of the town in which I live is very Catholic. And so he comes home and he's crying at night, going to bed. He's 6 years old, 6, 7 years old. I said, what's wrong? He goes, oh, it's God, this, Jesus, that. I don't know anything. I thought I was being a good mom. There was Greek mythology, Norse mythology, Christian mythology. I was covering everything, but it wasn't good enough. So I said, I know the place. So I get them dressed up, and my older son doesn't want to come. I said, well, we're going to go to the toy store afterwards, and I'm not coming back to get you. So if you want to go to the toy store, you better get on board. So, and as being Unitarians, we didn't get all dressed up. We just put on our school clothes. We went. One, the younger one sat beside me on my right, and my older son sat to the side, and my late husband just stayed home. And the minister says, I've not read this poem in 2-3 years, but I'm going to read it to you today. And he read Ithaca.
Wow.
I went, it's my church. It's my church. Yeah. It's my church. And I've always gone. It is just, I knew it was my church. I mean, that is why it's about the journey. And I walked in there being a very strict atheist, and I'm not any longer. Had the minister said God, I would have had a hard time with that. And now I have a belief that holds that in my belief system, holds God, holds the universe, holds all that happens. Even this, I guess it's a serendipitous of that occasion. I go, oh, perhaps that is God speaking or the universe speaking. This is where I needed to be. And I'm so thankful for this church. It is without this church, I don't think I could have survived what I survived. So
that is fantastic. Wow. Well, I want to ask more about those later years, but before that, I wanted to ask, when you were a kid and moving around so much, maybe I missed this reason, but why was it that you guys were moving around so much, you and your parents?
So my dad, I jokingly say he's a little crazy, and it's true. My dad was in the 8th Air Force before it was the Air Force. It was the Army Air Corps, and he was did the daylight bombing in Europe. And of the 75 men he went over with, only 3 of them lived.
Oh,
so he was a little crazy, and he just needed to move all the time. Just
okay.
And in his later years, he died at 86. When he was 86. In his later years, he was starting to do some stuff with the mental health stuff with the VA. But prior to that, those World War II vets, they came home. My mother's cousin was on the Bataan Death March. I remember him coming to our house in New Hampshire and just shaking like this. It was the trauma that was done, and only the recognition that, oh, you are a hero, not how are you damaged. Whereas now we are so fortunate to have a more understanding community for those who have decided to have that as their career. And so we moved like every 2 years, but luckily for me, I was one of 4 kids. So when I moved, I had a tribe with me.
Yeah.
It was really nice. It was really, and that's the benefit of, and I used to feel sorry for kids who only had one sibling, or God forbid they were an only child. How could that be? And if you're only one of 2, oh, that's terrible. Too bad you don't have enough. I always wanted to have 5 kids, have a basketball team,
Yeah.
I only got 2.
I also wanted to talk about I guess we haven't mentioned math yet, but I know early in your life you kind of found an enthusiasm for math, and you mentioned reading fairy tales too. And so before we get to math, I just wanted to ask, how do you feel like the fairy tales shaped your, morality or your worldview when you were growing up?
So for me, when I look back, I actually was so into fairy tales, I collected them. I books and books of fairy tales. I remember my brother buying me, his last name is Lamb, Mary and I don't know her husband, Arthur or William Lamb. They did some fairy tale books like the Blue Fairy Tale, the Brown Fairy Tale book. They're really great fairy tales. It helped me because I was just like the stories in the Bible, as now being a Unitarian for a few decades, I've heard a lot of those stories, but they are tales on how to run your life, or give you an opportunity to see what might happen and how other people are judging it. So many times it is, it's not the, like in Goldilocks and Three Bears, it's not the hot porridge or the cold porridge, it's the porridge that's just right. It's that middle road. It's not and there's a story about this prince. He needs to choose a princess, and his mother has decided this great task, and it's to cut this piece of cheese. And each girl, 3 girls, of course, always 3. The trilogy comes in so many times in fairy tales. It's very familiar. And so one girl cuts the rind real close to the edge. The mother's saying, oh, she's going to be too stingy. And the other one just cuts out the middle. Oh, she's just going to be wasteful. And the other one cuts it just right. And of course, the prince chooses her. It's always a time. It's always choosing and looking at the paths forward. And I just found them they gave me a sense of sort of control and of righteousness, and what is good behavior. Remember this one tale of a king, of course, and his daughter, and she's just rotten to the core, or she's just very willful. Her mother died, years ago, and here she's this willful little girl, and the father just gets disgusted and sends her off to live with the cook. And when she lives with the cook makes her do work, makes her contribute, asks her to be part of the group, and in there she becomes a worthy person. There's that story of the little red hen, where there's the mouse and the rat, and the mouse, the rat, and the cat, and they won't help the hen plant the wheat, sow the wheat, tend the wheat, cut the wheat, grind the wheat, make the cake. They won't help, but they want to have the cake afterwards. She says, well, you know what? I will share with you, but this wasn't right, and I'm not sure I'm going to share that much with you. It's really, you have to participate. If you don't participate, you don't earn the rewards of the culture. So that's sort of the morality that, that's.
Yeah, so it gave you like a moral compass. The fairy tales gave you a moral compass, and your love for math kind of maybe gave you a sense of awe about nature and the universe or something. And so were your parents into math, or was that more of a personal thing that you found on your own?
My mother was a cultural anthropologist. And so math, so she did research, and so there's math and statistics and that. But my dad was a tool designer and an engineer after the war, and so he always had a slide rule, and his book of trig tables. If you don't know about trig tables, you don't want to know about them. They're not much fun. I don't know how old you are, Matthew, but when I started teaching, I taught how to use trig tables, and I taught how to take using the algorithm for taking the square root by hand. It was so complex, but you can do it. It's all halving and all sorts of stuff. It's not hard. But mathematics, mathematics is all about, it's two things. It's the infinity to the ends of the universe. And also it's to the very, in Euclidean geometry, what's interesting happens right down there at the point. And so that, to me, it's like the beginning part and out to the, it's just magical. It is, and there's elegance to it. If you take like I have a necklace, and if I were to take this little charm here, if you hang it, that shape, that's a parabola. It doesn't matter. And if you tell me where it's going to land, I can give you the equation for that. It's not hard. Yeah. It's just fun. And mathematics is just, there's a joy in it. There's a splendor to it. It's almost a religious experience. Yeah. And in fact, mathematics came out of religion because they were hunting for God. If I'm mathematics.
Right. So you feel like, your love for mathematics and, the beauty and the elegance of it, that came before you finding you, but
it's all part of the same path. It was that poem, Ithaca. It's about the journey as you're going along. Enjoy those things. Partake of them. Let them inform you. Let them be part of your journey, and continue that growth. And so and I still tutor mathematics. I'll be tutoring tomorrow afternoon. The kid who does trigonometry needs that trig, and and I have it. They need it, so it's easy. Yeah. But the younger grades are harder to teach. I have to tell you, the younger grades are harder. The older grades, not a problem. But it's your journey. Wherever it leads you, if it's going into literature, into poetry, into fairy tales, into gardening, whatever it is, as you grow, as you go, you grow. As long as you keep that, the mind open and searching and the search.
Yeah, and that sense of participation that you're talking about. Having an active engagement, and then enjoying the fruits that come out of that, rather than just passively moving through life without that sense of curiosity and openness. And
I can't imagine anything worse than just sitting, and now I know as I will get older, then I will slow down. I understand that. And, because it's not as easy to run down the driveway as it was 20, 25, 30 years ago, but I can still do it,
Yeah.
and you get out and you walk and you see what's there, and to notice things around you, and you just, suck in life.
Yes. Yes. Now, you talked about how the second time that you went to that UU church and he read the same poem that he had read like 3 or 4 years before when you went, which is amazing. And it seems synchronistic that happened. I wanted to just ask if there were any other kind of mysterious or synchronistic experiences throughout the years that stood out like that.
Oh, life. Oh, sure. So I guess one of the ones that I don't think we start remembering much until we go into adolescence. I really don't think we do. I think we are more focused on parents and on that. But once we go into adolescence, our memories, while we have them as younger people, we have many more of them because we're more involved with self. And so there are a variety of them, but one that was significant to me was meeting my late husband. My aunt my dad's half sister had terminal cancer. She had uterine cancer, and she had come to visit us. They had been not in communication for many, many years, and he realized she was not well, and so she came to visit us. And my parents took a little like apartment, like a Airbnb, but there was no such thing then, for 2 weeks in Ocean Beach. And I was just telling my sister-in-law about this 2 days ago. Just, is that why you always go to Ocean Beach when you go there? And I always, so what happened is that my parents had a 2-week thing for Ocean Beach. And so I left, boyfriend, left back in La Mesa, which is about 20 miles from the beach. So, I wasn't going to be visiting. And I met this boy. Eventually becomes my husband. But I was sitting there on the beach, and I was dressed in this what we used to call a Jesus robe, which is basically terry cloth thing, cut out the neck, so you can't see what I look like. And I was cute in those days, in my little bikini. But so he's on the beach, and he's squishing his feet in the sand, and showing these little girls how to catch seaweed. And he sees me watching him. He walks up to us, "Hey, you want to join us?" And I said, "Absolutely." And so that was the beginning. What was interesting is that he had those 2 weeks off from his job. And so, we, all the kissing and stuff went on, and the next weekend comes and my boyfriend really wants to come down and see me. And he says, I can't hang out with you this weekend. My girlfriend, I'm going to, I says, great. Because my boyfriend's coming down, and, yeah. And so, then I went off to San Diego State, and he went to the University of Irvine for only a semester. And then he came back, and, 2 years later, we got married, and 5 years later, we had a child. And, here it is. Oh, gosh, 50, we would have been married 52 years. Yeah, 52 years this year we would have been married.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible. Long. Timing is so crazy. It's really weird how timing gets aligned like that.
Oh, and so when I bought this house, in the house in which I live, and it was a large down payment, but I had some, after he passed away, I had some insurance. And the real estate agent said, "Oh, okay, we're gonna, do it on this date." And I went, "Oh, do we have to?" She says, "Yeah, that's the day." It happened to be on his birthday that we signed the papers. It's like, okay, this is his gift to me is this house.
Yeah.
And when my ex-husband and I divorced, I kept the house. And because it was my purchasing of it. He ex-husband is really nice guy, and he's also, and I met him at a UU church. First day he came in to see the service, I was giving a service, and wow. The sermon was on time and how we spend our time, because how you spend your time shows me, without your saying, what you value.
Yeah, true.
I value this church. I spend my time at it. I spend my time, my treasures, my energies.
Right.
And you do too. It's
Yeah.
an important place.
Yeah. So when you were ambivalent about church for a long time, and the first time you went to the UU church, it was mainly because you wanted to get this thing so that your son could join the Cub Scouts. But then you fell in love with the church, and not only did you start attending regularly, but you started to give sermons and be like highly, highly involved.
Yeah.
And so can you say anything about like what it is that you've gotten specifically about UU and what you value about that specific religion?
It gives you space to grow. And here's a perfect example. And people in the church can help you change, can help you see something differently. I don't think there's any two of us that believe the same thing. And I remember after I had been going to church now for like 2 months, so that's maybe 8 times. And my late husband says, "Oh, maybe I'll come too," because I come home telling all these great thoughts, and it's about asking you to think. And he said, "Maybe I'll come too." I said, "Okay, but if you decide to not go, I'm still staying because this is my church. This is my church." It's Now, what was the question you asked me? Because I got off track.
I'm just curious about what kept you going back and passionate about UU and what you still love about it.
Okay. I love the ability to change. And I had a significant change for me. I considered myself back 30 years ago, I considered myself a fair weather Unitarian. No, I'm sorry, misspoke. Foul weather Unitarian. I only went when the weather was bad. So if the weather was good in Buffalo, you're outside. And so I was at what we called, it was called a SLUD meeting. It was St. Lawrence Unitarian Universalist District. And that's when the American U.S. Unitarians and Canadian Unitarians were all one, and they split a few years ago, which is too bad. It's not a good idea. But anyway, they did. And I went to one of those meetings, and I was very proud, saying, "Well, I'm a foul weather Unitarian." She says, "Well, let me tell you, those doors were open when you walked through because someone cared enough to attend, to be there and give their time, not just their money and their committee meetings, but they attended." And I went, darn, she's right. I need to show up. Sometimes it's just showing up. When you're going to have a party and you invite 12 friends, and by the time the party comes, maybe 3 or 4 of them would say, "Oh, I can't make it. Pretty soon, it's not so much a party, it's like a gathering. Yeah. And so you need to show up. And I think I keep coming back because I keep learning. I'm being challenged to grow. I'm not being told what to do. I think being a Unitarian is the hardest religion there is, because some people say, "Oh, it's just easy, you can believe what you want." And yeah, no, you are allowed to, but when you have a belief system, you are obligated. No one pardons you, no one forgives you. You are obligated to live that truth. And just yesterday, I was talking to someone, and this friend is she's actually my therapist. She's frequently late to the meetings. And I was saying the last few years, 5 years or so, I've learned 2 things. And one of them is not being late. I was going out with some friends, and one of them said to me, "Well, I'll pick you up at such and such a time." Now, all right, this is just a new friend. Are you a person who's always late, or are you on time? And I said, "Oh, I'm on time," but I wasn't. I realized that I was known by my friends and family as, "Yeah, Marlana will show up late." And I decided to change because I was being known as someone who was late. And so the church allows you to grow and change, just like that instance did. And in talking to this friend therapist, I became very sad because she's always late. And I was telling her this story, and then I wanted to apologize, and then I realized, oh, if I apologize, then I'm bringing it up again. And I was literally, the tears were right here. I said, you're a great therapist. I did not mean to say that in any way to imply. She said, no, I'm your therapist. You can't guard your words with me. You have to tell me what you're feeling. And I was like, but I was, in tears, because I need to live my truth, and that is to take care of others. I want to, this church has allowed me to grow and change. I'm not as callous as I was. I am in meditation because of this church. A fellow in this church took my ex-husband to a meditation retreat. He brought back this book called Meditation. I read it. I thought, maybe this will be the way that'll help me. And, I've tried many kinds of meditation, and this is called passage meditation. And I've been doing it for 22 years now. Every morning, get myself up, and I just saw a t-shirt that said, sit, stay, heal. The heal is spelled H-E-E-L, not H-E-A-L, H-E-A-L, not H-E-E-L. Yeah, so it's and that's
that's great. That's beautiful.
The church is the most. It is, without the church, I couldn't. It has to be here in my life. I have to donate my time, my effort, my energy, my finances. It matters.
Yeah.
This is a community that is constantly changing, constantly growing, and allowing you and encouraging you and asking you to also grow. Yep. And participate. Yep. Be there, show up, be one of us.
Yeah.
That's all they're asking.
Yep. The free and responsible search for truth and meaning, and encouraging us to really show up. That's I love that about you as well. And your reference to meditation kind of segues to what I wanted to ask you about, because I know we've talked about meditation a little bit before in the past, and I guess I didn't realize that you've been meditating pretty much every day for 22 years. That's amazing. And so what can you say the type of meditation again, and what that consists of?
Sure. It's called passage meditation.
Okay.
The fellow who developed it was called Eknath Easwaran. His name is spelled Eknath. That's his first name. Easwaran is Easwaran. And he came over here in the late 60s on a Fulbright, and his yogi, his teacher, was his grandmother, and taught him a lot. And he was the first one to ever teach meditation here in the US. He taught at Berkeley, and he has an ashram in Petaluma, which is in Northern California, outside of San Francisco. And so passage meditation asks you to take a passage and memorize it. And I started with St. Francis prayer. There's no God in there. And in those days I was still, 22 years ago, God was a little hard for me to hold. Mm-hmm. And it's not. Now I feel God at all times. It is what I feel is God, at all times.
Yeah.
And not for everyone, but that's Unitarian. And so it asks you to memorize the passage, and then to sit quietly, back straight, and to quietly and silently repeat that passage to yourself as slowly as you can. And every time you feel yourself, you start to solve the world's problems, or you start to make this list for the day, you bring yourself back to the passage. And if you bring yourself back in 30 minutes, only 30 times, hey, you're good. If you bring yourself back 600 times in 30 minutes, that's good too. And then as you get used to that passage, then you expand and you go to another passage. But these passages can't just be, one that, oh, you like that poem. No, they have to be sort of passages from the tried and true religions of the world that have stood the test of time. So he has put out a book called God makes the rivers to flow. And in there are a lot of Zen, Tao. There's certainly, of course, there's Jewish and Christian, a lot of Christian, but a lot of everything. Native American, Muslim, Hindu, a lot of different pairs. Someone can always find something in there that, and in the back of the book, if you're wrestling with jealousy, you can look at the topic and go to these passages, memorize that passage. And I have to tell you, I've tried so many other forms and they didn't work for me. My mind was like this monkey, as it's described in a tree, and my monkey was just whipping around. And now, for me, other than the church, it is the single most important thing I've ever done for myself in my entire life. Above having children, it is, I mean, having children is significant, but you grow them and then you hold them with open hands and they go away. And maybe they come back once in a while, maybe they don't. But for me, myself, to cling to my child is not healthy, but to cling to meditation. And in the meditation, there's also, there are sort of like 8 points, very similar to AA in some sense. You're to meditate daily, use a mantra, put others first, slow down, read the mystics. I can never remember all 3 of them, which is, I probably should. But one of the, the talk of slowing down is important, and reading the mystics is important. So I try to read spiritual literature every day, and it's growth. It's growth. And for you, in all the, English things that you do, you read a book and then you read it a second time and you get more meaning. Poetry, you read it first, you read it the second, third, fourth time. And it's the same way. I've now read the Bhagavad Gita, I think 7 or 8 times, the Dhammapada 3 or 4 times. And you get more out of the spiritual literature every time. Every time you go into it, you get more out of it. And so it's a very healthy thing to do. And without the church, my ex-husband wouldn't have gone to this meditation and brought home this book, and I wouldn't have read it, and I wouldn't have had it.
Yes.
So the church is the reason that I'm meditating, because of, all those connections.
The butterfly effect. Yeah.
It is.
I will say, I obviously I love poetry and literature, but I probably read more mystic literature than anything else. I'm totally obsessed, pretty much. And I love the Bhagavad Gita.
That I would recommend to you.
Sure.
The Way to God. It's by Gandhi. Okay. Cool. The preface is by his grandson Arun Gandhi, who lives in Rochester, New York, actually. And the forward is by his grandson, and the introduction is by Michael Nagler, who's a great spiritualist. And then this other one that my older son gave me, and these are the books that you want to read slowly and then read them again and read them again. This one is called Taking the Leap. And it's significant. Yeah, it's significant. Yeah. So in reading that, so you've been reading the Bhagavad Gita yourself?
I read it recently. I had read bits and pieces in the past, but I read the whole thing recently because I've been doing tons of research into Hinduism and Vedanta, and I've been into Buddhism for probably 12 years, so I've read a lot of Buddhist texts. And it really is important to read the ancient wisdom and even modern commentary on that ancient wisdom, and just really digging into the ideas. And that's another thing I like about you is Universalists and Unitarians, even in the 1800s, were some of the earliest people in America that were interested in comparative religion and learning things from other religious traditions. And I'm like that, and I'm actually, I'm writing a book right now that's basically exploring some of the overlaps between various traditions. So I have I have specific notebooks dedicated to specific traditions, so I did a big old notebook on Hinduism recently. So I dug into, that's when I was digging into the Bhagavad Gita and everything.
Have you ever seen the movie Bagger Vance?
I have. It's been a while though.
Yeah, and if you read that with the understanding of Bhagavad Gita, They all have the same names,
Oh,
and
wow.
do it
I did
again.
not even think about the connection between those two.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Captain Juna, like for Arjuna.
Wow.
Okay. So you when you see it again and you have that in mind, you
Yeah.
go, oh wow. Because it gives you that sense of just slow your mind down, let it be. Just
Hmm.
watch the things happen. And for me, and for me, my Hinduism is so ancient. It is the most ancient of those that we sort of draw from right now.
Yep.
Certainly, there would have been, perhaps the Native Americans are even more ancient, but I don't know, but that is written down. All that Hindu literature is so powerful. And when you go into it and you read it again and again, I don't know which translation you use. The translation that I use of the Bhagavad Gita was written by Eknath because he was a Sanskrit scholar in India before he came to the US on his Fulbright. And so I figured, he knows the words, he knew the language. But the first time I read it, this is my being truly Unitarian, I didn't want someone else to tell me what it was about. So I didn't read it with its commentary because he has a commentary and then you read the passage. No, I skipped all his commentary, read it straight myself first because I wanted to do it myself. And that's that, I think if you are determined to be a thinker, if you want to be thoughtful and make decisions for yourself, there is no better place to land spiritually than being a Unitarian. There's just no better.
There's not.
How did you find this church?
Well, I grew up going to a Methodist church with my parents. My parents are both pretty traditionally Christian still to this day. And long story short, I went through a big Christian phase in college, and I was reading the Bible a lot. I was going to Bible study every week, and eventually really digging into kind of what you're saying, like trying to dig into it without the commentary, trying to figure it out for myself and what was true and what was not true, what should I value. And I eventually got into Eastern spirituality and Buddhism specifically, and Zen even more specifically around 2007, 2008. And just got into a more expanded exploration of my own being and my own spirituality, and didn't go to church for lots and lots and lots of years, and never really thought I would ever go to any sort of church again. I had not a lot of interest going to church anymore. And but I had seen the first Unitarian church in Koreatown because I actually live like 0.5 miles from the church right now. I live in Koreatown.
That's great.
Yeah, so I saw it, and I think I had seen it here and there, but I never really thought much about it. But then my girlfriend said that, I don't even know exactly why she said this or why she felt this way, because neither one of us were explicitly religious, really, even though throughout all these years, I've always been drawn to spirituality and reading about different stuff related to that. But anyway, she said, well, I kind of want to just try out a church around here somewhere and see what it's like. She wasn't saying a UU church, just a church in general. And I said, well, I saw that there's a First Unitarian church like right down the street. And in college, I got really into Ralph Waldo Emerson and Whitman and stuff. And I had heard about Unitarianism through Emerson. And I always had the impression that it was more open-minded, it was more liberal and more progressive and stuff like that. So I was like, well, if we're going to go to a church, that seems like it might be the one that's most aligned with something I would actually, resonate with. And we walked up there, because every time we would go to church, we just walked because it was so close.
Sure.
So we walked up there the first Sunday that we attended, and I think I probably talked to Rochelle and maybe Kaola. Both of them were very, friendly and welcoming to me. And I ended up I liked the vibes there. I liked the people. Everybody seemed genuine. It didn't seem dogmatic, and it didn't seem to require me to change any. I could go there authentically, be myself. And I liked that I liked that we had different speakers every week, because I never knew exactly what I was going to get, whether it was going to be more kind of from a religious lens or political or scientific, or and I kind of fell in love with it, especially after I started going to small groups, in person with Keola. And so I feel extremely blessed to have found it. It's been a great thing that landed in my life, for sure.
Yeah, it's one of those things that when, if it fits, you walk through the door, and if it fits, it fits, and you go, oh,
Yeah.
okay, I'm home.
Yeah.
This is where I belong. This is where my soul rests. This is, even though when I walked through it, I didn't think of any soul or anything like that. It wasn't my intent at all. It's that's a nice experience. Well, I'm glad you found this.
Me too.
And
yeah.
It honestly, when these are people that, when my first husband died, they provided food for me and my two sons for a month. Every day on the doorstep was food. I had two teenage boys, and it was a sudden death, and so it was very unexpected, and I had no emotional resources at all. There, you don't when something happens.
Yeah.
It is what happens. But the church, and I remember going to the church. His memorial service was that first Sunday, and then the next week I asked a girlfriend to go with me, and I sat there and I thought, these people love me. I just, and I just, without them and all that they have, and yes, they're quirky, and yes, there are personalities, and yes, we attract some weirdos. You and me among them, right?
Yes, of course.
But that's okay. We tolerate that. No, we don't tolerate. We embrace, we accept, it's part of who we are. Do I wish we had more diversity in age and in ethnicity? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I am just so amazed at the energy that First UU has. First Unitarian has more energy, more excitement, and it will be interesting to see when some of you folks, some of you younger folks decide to have children, where they fit in, how they fit in. Because when I first started at my church, it had a big decline in the late 70s. It was early 80s when I joined, and there were 5 kids in the RE. It was called at that time religious education. It's now called faith development. But there are 5 kids. 2 of them were mine. And there was a guy there who later became a minister, and he taught the class. It wasn't just babysitting; it was teaching a class. And that's what we need is we want to grow new UUs. And I mean, there's people like I think Reva is a lifelong Unitarian, and that's she had a youth group to go to.
Yeah,
we don't have a youth group. Youth don't have a place yet, unless the table's there. It doesn't happen. So there's there's some stuff that needs to be worked on eventually. But that's wonderful. There are people here that want to do that stuff.
Yeah. I haven't thought about that angle as much as I could have, and you're right. There's definitely a lack of youths and kids at the church.
If I were to have come, 30 years ago with a child in tow, I would have felt alienated. If I walked in that I saw, there were no other kids there. I think Denzi had a place where she kind of babysat kids, but it wasn't an educational program. And that would have been like, okay, what did you do? You played. That's a growing edge for the church as you think about getting back together. I'm hopeful that that we'll be able to still have some Zoom, because I will be so sorely missing if it doesn't happen. I know the connection's going to be bad, and I understand all that, and it may be that I just have to move back to LA. I mean, I don't know. You know.
Well, either way, I've thought about that with you specifically, you know, whether it's the services or the writing group. And I know that, you know, I know that you value it so much and we value you so much. So at the very least, at the writing group, when we start meeting in person, like, I want to have my tablet there for you to call in, you know?
Thank you. That's so nice.
Yeah.
And then on the few months out of the year that I will be there,
right.
I will join you in person, but
absolutely.
You know, for now.
Well, Marlana, this has been really fun. I have to wrap it up in a couple minutes because I have to go to work, but I really appreciate you doing this, and it's been fun to hear about your background and, you know, all the interesting things that have happened in your life. I wanted to, you know, because you said that nowadays you finally, or I don't know for how long you felt this way, but later on in your life, you started to feel more comfortable, maybe using the word God in your own way and not necessarily being repelled by it or whatever. And I know it's a word that has so much baggage, and so many people have so many different, you know, interpretations of what that means. But I wanted to ask you as a final question, you know, what is your personal notion of God, and in what ways does your notion of God relate to like the natural world? Because I know that you love taking walks and you love observing nature and stuff.
I've just been in meditation, actually. This has sort of come through, or post meditation, you know, in that time of reflection. I used to think of God as the ocean, and we are each these little drops of water. But then I started thinking that no, we're like the molecules inside the water, and we're part of it. But then I thought even deeper, just within the last week, no, we're even smaller than the molecules. We're just an essence, and it's the essence of everything. And so to me, God is energy, can be neither be created nor destroyed. And I am just energy. And that is, and so God is me, and I am God, and you are God, and we are God, and we are all one. And when we reach out and touch, and when we're sitting, it's like when we're sitting in conversation with someone, and you feel this almost this energy coming. It's like this love, this companionship, that is God. It is that energy. It can neither be created nor destroyed, and it has to be, and we have to take care of each other because of that, because you are me. I mean, there's that saying that we're all of one body. But when you take it to the physical level, would you take your own finger and hurt it? Would you stab your own knee? Would you hurt your body? But more than that, it's so much more expansive. It is this sense of awe that I am everything, and everything is me. And that's how I have, that is sort of how that's my answer to your question.
I love it. I love that. That's really beautiful. I'm gonna reflect on that. You know, I feel similarly about God as well, and it's a word that I'm constantly thinking about and kind of constantly revising my understanding of. Kind of what it seems like with you too. You know, you're constantly kind of revising your understanding of it, and the mystery is at the heart of it. You know, I mean, I think that it's ultimately unnameable and indefinable, and something that's beyond concepts, but it's fun to lightly, you know, try to put it into words.
It's like a stone skipping on the water. You really can't define it. It's like mathematics, in the elegance of mathematics. Gandhi said in this book that I'm reading, it is more accurate to say truth is God than God is truth. Truth is, and to live truth, to live honestly, you are living in God, or you are being the all you can be, to live in truth. And that is difficult to determine what that truth is, and to sit with it and to feel it, and to be as honest and reflective for yourself as you would be for someone else, and to not be critical, but to be honest, and to realize you've learned to not look at, it's like the meditation, to not look at a mistake as, oh, a mistake, but oh no, I recognized it as a mistake. Oh, okay, yeah, I'm learning.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like, for me, that you know, Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, you know, do unto others. That's it. A very good Christian Unitarian friend. And someone said, well, if you're so Christian, why are you here? She goes, because this church believes it and lives it.
Right. Amen.
There you go. Amen. Amen, brother.
Marlana, thank you so much. This was great.
My pleasure. Nice to do this with you, Matthew. It was my pleasure.